Hey there, it's Logan Albright here to talk to you about books. I was going to talk about a humorous science fiction book, but it's a gray, gloomy day here in Washington, D.C., with a little bit of drizzly rain, and it just didn't feel like the kind of day for a humor book. I wanted something a little more sinister, so I pulled out this book off my shelf called The Wine Dark Sea by Robert Aickman. Now, I am a huge fan of what's known as weird fiction, weird tales. These are stories of supernatural horror, usually in the vein of H.P. Lovecraft or Edgar Allan Poe, things like that. An awful lot of them were written in the early 20th century. I'm also a big fan of short stories. I think the short story is a really unique form that works well as a means of conveying ideas. If you have a really great idea, you can write it in a short story in 20 tight pages and really convey it and make a great story out of it. If you want to write a novel, you need something more than just an idea. You need characters, you need relatable situations. But I think short stories on the whole are harder to write than novels if you want to do it really well, because they have to be economical with words and you have to have them really tightly woven. So I love reading a good short story, and I find that a really good short story will really stick with you and live with you for a long time. So I encountered this book when I was over visiting London, England. I saw it in a bookshop. I had never heard of Robert Aickman before. He's a name that's new to me. He kind of wrote from the middle of the 20th century until the 80s when he died, so a little later than most of the writers I read in this genre. But I was attracted to this because I liked the title. I saw it in the horror section. The Wine Dark Sea is very evocative. It sounds beautiful. And there's a quote on the back cover from Neil Gaiman, who I'm an admirer of. And I'll read you the quote. It says, "Reading Robert Aickman is like watching a magician work, and very often I'm not even sure what the trick was. All I know is that he did it beautifully." I found that very intriguing. So I picked it up, and I'm really glad I did. It's got 8 stories in it, kind of on the long side for short stories. Some of them are up to 50 pages or so. But they're very subtle in their eeriness and their terror. They're not overt horror stories. There's no serial killers or anything like that. They're just kind of, something's off. They're kind of creepy. Sometimes you don't even know why you're scared of them, but they're great atmospheric tales. There's one, the last story in here is called Into the Wood, which I think is an absolute classic. It's about insomnia, and it's things that you never really thought you'd be scared of. He doesn't use the cliche tropes of vampires and zombies very much or things like that. Not even really ghosts, occasionally ghosts, but not as much. He takes unique ideas and things that you wouldn't think of associating with horror and makes them really great. Into the Wood is a fantastic story. I recommend it a lot. This is an edition from Faber and Faber, and they did a reprint in 2014 to mark the 100th anniversary of his birth. They did 4 volumes of short stories. This is the 4th. I think it was published posthumously in 1988. I'd be definitely interested in checking out the other ones. I haven't read them yet, but they're certainly interesting stories and very unlike a lot of other stuff that I've read. Very chilling. He is not that well known, I think, because he had a short career. He only wrote for a couple decades, and he didn't really produce a lot. I think he had 4 short story collections, maybe, and a couple of longer works, but I think less than 50 stories overall. Certainly not the volume of someone like an H.P. Lovecraft, so that's maybe why he's not that well known. But if you're in the mood for something just a little bit spooky, something that'll give you the chills, I think it's well worth checking out one of his story collections, and you wouldn't go wrong with this one, The Wine Dark Sea. Thanks, everybody, for watching.